When you have unresolved trauma from the past, it keeps your mast cells on high alert, and it makes you more reactive to all kinds of things, whether it's mold, whether it's situations, whether it's people, whether it's emotions, whether it's anything. It makes your body more reactive. So I'll talk about that in this video. First, let me say I'm not a medical doctor. This is not medical advice. It's based on my personal experiences for informational and educational purposes only. So how would past trauma affect your mast cells in the present moment? Why would they still be affecting you and make you more reactive to other things? Well, the reality is when you have past trauma that's unresolved, it keeps your mast cells in a prime spot where they're looking for other things that could be potential threats. This could be, foods, it could be smells, it could be mold, it could be emotions, it could be, various things, But when your body has been primed from past stress, your body is, when it's not resolved, it's kind of tense. It's tense all the time, and it's looking for things that remind it of the past stress. And you unknowingly keep seeing these things, and you keep seeing reminders because you haven't dealt with this past stress. And this has been my experience. So if you have unresolved trauma from the past and you're dealing with mast cell activation, you have to be willing to deal with that trauma, whether it's accepting the trauma, whether it's turning the trauma into something that you believe helped you, whether it's creating a new storyline about the events or how they're going to benefit you now in the future, whether it's believing that these things turned you now into a different person where you're proud of. Whatever it is, you have to be able to transition from trauma to triumph. You got to be able to switch from the point of view where you're the victim to you're the victor of the situation. And this is absolutely critical, because if you don't, you'll always be caught in these observations in life that will remind you of the past trauma subconsciously, and then you'll get triggered into these events and you'll feel unwell. And this will be what happens. To me, what would happen is the past trauma that I had, I would end up being reminded through seeing my daughter who was sick because I was sick in the past. And what happened was I would see her and it would remind me of being sick in the past subconsciously. It would make me feel physically sick, and it would set me back symptom-wise. And seeing that enough over time, it really drained my body physically. And even though there wasn't something physically wrong with me at the moment, I was still being exhausted and affected by my observations because they reminded me of past trauma. And this is how it is, with my daughter. She had past trauma. I had to go ahead and get custody of her when she was 18. She had issues before I got custody of her. Pretty much everybody who has mast cell activation has some history of past trauma, and it's kind of unresolved, or they're still the victim of it in their own mind, or they are still have not completely calmed down since then, and they've been kind of just in a defensive mindset, thinking of the next way to protect themselves and thinking ahead all the time, thinking of what could go wrong. This was me for years, because I had my dad that left me when I was younger, and then after that my mom remarried, we moved. And then I went ahead and got sick when I was 20 years old and lost pretty much everything I knew of, and then finally got better eventually in my 30s, and then saw my daughter get sick all over again. So I know exactly what it's like to see trauma and have that affect you and have that cause you symptoms. I know exactly what it's like. But the reality is, if you have mast cell activation syndrome, you have to look into what you're consuming. This is supplements and foods. Most of the time, too many supplements, the wrong supplements, too much meat, too many processed foods, eggs, dairy, nuts, seeds, gluten. You got to make sure you're testing for mycotoxins. You're doing the mycotoxin blood test, the antibody test. You're doing the urine test. You're seeing what comes up on both of these. You're seeing if you got mycotoxin illness, because that's almost goes hand in hand with mast cell activation. So if you have mast cell issues, you got to look at what you're consuming, what you're inhaling, and also what you're thinking, what you're doing. You can't do anything in excess. It has to be moderate. It has to be expected. You got to condition these mast cells through self-care activities like slow, deep breathing, meditation, stretching, walks in nature, prayer, things like that, on a consistent basis, so you start to recondition the mast cells. Do it at the same time every day, and your mast cells eventually within a few weeks will start to calm down naturally around that time. Because if you don't, you'll just keep on experiencing the same thing over and over again. And that's been my experience. So thanks for watching, everybody. Go to my website, endsickness.org. I got hundreds of articles, hundreds of videos in there teaching you how to heal yourself. Take care.